There are two types of silence in this world. There's the good kind, the pre-dawn quiet where the air is thick with salt and possibility, the sky just beginning to blush from black to bruised purple. That's the silence of potential, the silence of a job about to go right. Then there's the other kind, the heavy, leaden silence that presses in on you when you realize you are monumentally, unequivocally screwed. At 6 a.m. this morning, I was enjoying the first kind. I stood on a ridiculously pristine dock in a place called Serenity Springs, a name so aggressively cheerful it had to be hiding something sinister. I was sipping coffee that had gone cold an hour ago and admiring my charge, the USCGC Dauntless. She wasn't mine, of course. Guys like me don't own 110-foot, 180-ton chunks of American history. We just move them. The Dauntless was an island-class patrol boat, recently decommissioned and sold to a tech billionaire named Chadwick Thorne, a man who'd made his fortune convincing teenagers to film themselves dancing and who now wanted a rustic naval centerpiece for his private island in the Bahamas. My company, Nautical Logistics and Transport, or NLT, was tasked with the delicate operation of getting this steel behemoth from a naval yard in Jacksonville to Thorne's private dock. The Dauntless was a legend, having served for 30 years, chasing smugglers and saving lives. Now, her biggest challenge was becoming a rich guy's lawn ornament. It felt a little sacrilegious, like using the Constitution as a placemat. But Chadwick's money was green, and my boss liked green. The job was a logistical nightmare squared. The most direct route involved a shortcut through the labyrinthine canal system of Serenity Springs. It was a bizarre, man-made Venice carved out of the Florida marshland, where every McMansion had a boat slip bigger than my first apartment. Taking this route would save us 2 full days and nearly $250,000 in fuel, piloting fees, and extended insurance riders. I had a Bindra glorious 12-inch D-ring binder, tabbed and index filled with every permit known to man. County permits, Port Authority authorizations, waterway usage agreements, environmental impact statements. I had paperwork that could choke a blue whale. And I had a ticking clock. A tropical disturbance spinning up off the coast had just been upgraded to Tropical Storm Brenda. As of yesterday, a storm watch was in effect for the entire coastline. I had a 36-hour window, max, to get the Dauntless from the safety of this canal, through the Floodgate, and out into the intracoastal waterway before the Port Authority locked everything down. Leaving a vessel of this size in a residential canal during a named storm wasn't just a bad idea. It was a career-ending, company, bankrupting, $10 million battering ram of a bad idea. The only thing standing between me and the open ocean was one small concrete building housing the controls for a single hydraulic floodgate. And, as it turned out, the gatekeeper to that building, her name was Carol. My only interactions with her so far had been a series of terse emails. She was the president of the Serenity Springs Homeowners Association. My initial request, sent 6 weeks ago, had been met with a flurry of questions. There were concerns, she'd written, about non-native hull coloration, excessive displacement wake, and the potential for industrial noise pollution during non-approved hours. I had answered every single one with painstaking, professionally worded detail, referencing the specific county and state statutes that superseded her little fiefdom's rules. I hadn't heard back in a week, which I, in my foolish optimism, had taken as grudging acceptance. Oh, what a sweet summer child I was. All right, she's prepped, said Dave, my right-hand man, clapping the dust from his hands. Dave was a former Navy boatswain's mate with a neck as thick as my thigh and a vocabulary that was 90% creative profanity. He was the most competent human being I knew. Ready to pop the gate and get this old girl on her way. Let's do it, I said, grabbing my binder. It felt like a shield. Time to introduce Serenity Springs to the sweet sound of progress. We walked the 50 yards down the manicured concrete path to the gear room. It was an unassuming little box of a building, painted the same inoffensive shade of beige as every other structure in the community. It looked harmless. But as we got closer, I saw 2 things that made the good silence curdle into the bad kind. The first was a brand new, oversized, rust-proof master lock clamped firmly onto the door's hasp. The second was the sheet of paper taped to the door. It wasn't just taped. It was perfectly centered, its edges ruler straight, and it was laminated. You have to understand something about the art of petty tyranny. Anyone can tape up a sign. But a person who takes the time to laminate a violation notice is operating on a different level of bureaucratic malice. This wasn't a warning, it was a monument. It was a declaration. I stepped closer to read it. The header, in an imperious Times New Roman bold font, read, "Notice of Violation." "You've got to be kidding me," Dave muttered, the first hint of a profane storm brewing in his tone. The notice cited Serenity Springs HOA Bylaw 74C, subsection 8, "Use of community utility infrastructure for commercial haulage is strictly prohibited without prior written consent from the Architectural Environmental Committee." It went on to state that all access to the commune Floodgate controls was hereby suspended, pending a full review. The committee, it cheerfully informed us, convened for its monthly meeting on the third Wednesday of every month. Today was Monday. The storm was due Wednesday evening. A quiet whirring sound made me turn. A golf cart, the electric chariot of the suburban despot, glided to a halt on the path behind us. At the helm was a woman in her late 50s, dressed in immaculate white tennis shorts, a pink polo shirt, and a visor that seemed to surgically part her helmet of blonde hair. She held a clipboard to her chest like it was a holy text. Her smile was bright, wide, and completely devoid of warmth. It was the smile of a predator that knows you've already walked into its trap. "Good morning," she chirped, her voice as crisp as a freshly printed violation. "Can I help you, gentlemen?" I held up my binder, the holy text of my people. "I'm Leo Marks with NLT. You must be Carol. We're here to open the floodgate. We have a schedule to keep. And," I added, tapping the thick plastic cover, "a permit for every bit of it." Carol's smile didn't waver. If anything, it tightened. "Oh, I'm sure you think you do, but I'm afraid your county permit doesn't supersede our community bylaws. It's all right there in the covenants you implicitly agreed to the moment your vessel entered our waterway. Page 82, I believe? I can wait if you need to look it up." Dave, who had all the patience of a lit firecracker, stepped forward. "Ma'am, with all due respect, there's a tropical storm coming. We need to move this boat now." "And we're all very concerned about the storm," Carol said, her tone dripping with false empathy. "Which is precisely why all unapproved heavy machinery operation is being curtailed. It's a matter of resident safety. The gate will remain closed." She gave the laminated notice a loving little pat. "The committee will be happy to review your application next month." She put the golf cart in reverse, gave us a little wave, and glided away, humming a tune that sounded vaguely like a funeral dirge. Dave and I were left standing in the oppressive humidity, staring at a $2 lock that was holding a $10 million ship hostage. The bad silence was deafening. "Okay," I said, taking a deep breath and trying to wrestle my soaring blood pressure back into the 4-digit range. "Plan B. We reason with her." Dave snorted. "Leo, you've got a better chance of reasoning with a seagull trying to steal your sandwich." "Seagulls can be reasoned with," I countered, already walking in the direction her golf cart had gone. "You just have to be holding a bigger sandwich. Come on, bring the binder." We found her by the community tennis courts, where she was instructing a groundskeeper on the proper, HOA-approved method for trimming the hedges. Apparently, he was using a 30-degree angle when the bylaws clearly specified a 45-degree angle for oleander. The poor guy looked like he was ready to turn the hedge trimmer on himself. "Carol," I said, approaching with the calm, steady demeanor of a bomb disposal expert, "I think there's been a misunderstanding." She turned, her expression one of mild surprise, as if she couldn't imagine why we were still there. "I don't believe so. It seems very straightforward to me." "Okay, look." I opened the binder on the hood of her golf cart, turning to a tab marked County Port Authority. I pointed to the highlighted section. "This is the authorization from the Port Authority of Jacksonville, clearing this vessel, the USCGC Dauntless, for passage through this canal system between the hours of 600 and 1,800 today. It notes the storm watch and gives us priority." I flipped the page. "This is the permit from the county, acknowledging the route and our compliance with all navigational and environmental regulations." I flipped again. "And this," I said, pointing to the multi-million-dollar figure, "is our insurance bond. It indemnifies Serenity Springs against any and all potential damages. We are fully licensed, fully insured, and fully authorized by every governing body that actually matters." I thought it was a pretty compelling case. I had facts, I had logic, I had official documents. Carol had her own binder. She delicately placed her clipboard down, retrieved an identical white binder from the passenger seat of her cart, and opened it to a page marked with a pink sticky tab. "That's all lovely," she said, not even glancing at my paperwork. "But it doesn't address Bylaw 43F, noise pollution. The operation of any machinery producing sounds in excess of 60 decibels is prohibited before 9:00 a.m. The gate hydraulics, I'm told, are quite loud." "It's an emergency," I ground out. "The storm." "And I'm sure it is," she interrupted smoothly. "Which brings us to Bylaw 112. A. Aesthetic harmony. Your boat," she said the word like it was something she'd scraped off her shoe, "is casting a rather oppressive shadow on Mrs. Henderson's prize-winning hibiscus garden. That's a clear violation of the community's Flora Enjoyment Clause." "The Flora Enjoyment Clause?" Dave whispered behind me. "Is that a real thing?" I was starting to feel like I'd fallen through a wormhole into a dimension crafted by Franz Kafka and Martha Stewart. My internal monologue was just a continuous, high-pitched scream. On the outside, I maintained a smile that felt like it was cracking my face. "Carol," I said, my voice dangerously low, "there is a 180-ton steel vessel in your canal. In less than 48 hours, winds are expected to reach over 70 miles per hour. If those mooring lines snap, this boat will not just cast a shadow on the hibiscus, it will turn Mrs. Henderson's entire house into a pile of kindling. This isn't about noise or aesthetics anymore. This is about public safety." She listened patiently, her head tilted. When I was finished, she sighed, a put-upon sound of immense suffering. "And that is exactly why the committee needs to review your application. To assess these risks, we can't just have people operating heavy industrial equipment without proper oversight. It would be chaos." I stared at her. She was using my own logic against me, twisting it into a pretzel of bureaucratic nonsense. She wasn't a gatekeeper. She was a black hole, sucking all reason and sanity into a void of pure, weaponized pedantry. "The committee meets next month," she said, her smile returning at full force. "You're welcome to attend, perhaps bring a PowerPoint. We do love a good PowerPoint." She patted my binder as if it were a child's art project, got back into her cart, and drove away, leaving me standing in a cloud of her smug perfume and my own impotent fury. "All right," Dave said, his voice grim. "Plan C." "What's Plan C?" "I call my cousin Ricky. He's got a cutting torch and a don't ask, don't tell policy." "No," I said, shaking my head. "No, we do this by the book. Even if the book is insane." I pulled out my phone. "We're escalating. I'm calling the police." The non-emergency dispatcher sounded about as thrilled to hear my story as a cat being told it's time for a bath. But, to her credit, she said she'd send a car. 20 minutes later, a police cruiser rolled up. 2 officers got out. The one driving was older, with a mustache that had seen more misery than most people see in a lifetime and a weary slump to his shoulders that suggested he'd already reached his daily quota for human stupidity. His name tag read Miller. The other was young, sharp, and by the book, with a fresh-out-of-the-academy posture. His tag said Davis. I gave them the rundown, speaking slowly and calmly, emphasizing the official permits and the public safety risk posed by the storm. I showed them the binder. Miller flipped through a few pages with a practiced, disinterested air. Davis, meanwhile, looked at the laminated notice on the door. "So she put her own lock on it?" Miller asked, his voice gravelly with resignation. "That's right, officer," I said. "She's illegally obstructing our access to." As if summoned by the word illegally, Carol's golf cart materialized once more. She zipped over, this time with a look of deep concern on her face, the picture of a law-abiding citizen being harassed. "Officers, thank goodness you're here," she said, her voice trembling slightly. It was a masterful performance. "These men have been trying to access our community's private utility equipment without authorization. I've tried to explain the rules, but they're being very aggressive." Miller turned his tired eyes from me to her, then back to me. It was the look of a man who knew, with the certainty of a prophet, that no matter what happened here, his afternoon was ruined. I held up my hands. "Aggressive? I've been nothing but professional. I've shown you the permits, Carol." "Your permits don't give you the right to trespass and damage community property," she shot back, dropping the concerned act for a flash of pure steel. Officer Davis, the rookie, stepped forward. "Ma'am, do you have documentation proving the HOA has jurisdiction over this specific piece of equipment?" Carol beamed, tapping her own white binder. Right here, officer. Covenants, conditions, restrictions, Article 4, Section 2. All utility access points within the boundaries of Serenity Springs are the exclusive property and responsibility of the Homeowners Association. Davis nodded, impressed. Miller just sighed. He'd seen this movie 1,000 times. Sir, Miller said to me, his voice flat. I understand your frustration, I really do. And you, he said, turning to Carol, I understand your position. But what we have here is a civil dispute. It's not a criminal matter. What? I exclaimed. She's holding a $10 million asset hostage. According to her binder, Miller said, gesturing with his thumb, you're trying to use her property without her permission. According to your binder, you have the right to be here. That's a matter for a judge to decide. A judge? The storm will be here by then. I could feel a vein pulsing in my temple. That boat will become a wrecking ball. It could destroy homes. People could get hurt. Miller rubbed the bridge of his nose. My official advice to you, sir, is to contact a lawyer and have them file for an emergency injunction. My unofficial advice is to not, under any circumstances, cut that lock. That would be destruction of property, and then I would have to arrest you. And you, he said, fixing Carol with a weary glare. I'd think long and hard about the liability you're taking on here. Carol puffed up her chest. I am simply protecting our community, officer. Right, Miller muttered. He tipped his hat. Folks, you have a nice day. Try to work it out. And with that, they got back in their cruiser and drove away, leaving me in the legal and logistical equivalent of quicksand. The very system I was relying on to enforce order had just shrugged, told me, sucks to be you, and vanished. I was legally prohibited from solving my own problem. Okay, Dave said, his voice dangerously quiet. I'm calling Ricky. No, I said, though my resolve was crumbling. One last shot. The pros. There are guys you call when you need a plumber. Then there are guys you call when you need to lift a bridge. Gus was the second kind. His company, Gus's Industrial Solutions, had a simple motto on its business card. If it's heavy, we can move it. He specialized in what he called problematic access. I had him on speed dial. An hour later, a Ford F-350 that looked like it ate other trucks for breakfast thundered down the pristine street and parked behind us. Gus climbed out. He was a barrel-chested man in his 60s with a magnificent gray beard, hands like cinder blocks, and a face that had been carved from granite by years of hard work and sunshine. He took one long look at the situation. The massive cutter in the canal, the small concrete hut, the gleaming master lock, and the perfectly laminated notice. He let out a low, appreciative whistle. "Hoo boy," he rumbled, his voice like gravel pouring into a barrel. "Now that there is a thing of beauty, you've got yourself a grade A, fully certified Karen lock, son. Can you get it open, Gus?" I asked, my voice pleading. "Name your price. I'll pay it." Gus ambled over to the door. He didn't even touch the lock. He just stared at the laminated sign. "See the lamination?" he said, pointing a thick finger at it. "That's commitment. That's a woman who owns her own laminator. That tells you everything you need to know." "Gus, please." He shook his head, a look of genuine regret on his face. "Son, I could have this door off its hinges with a strong fart and a crowbar. That ain't the problem. The problem is that right there." He tapped the paper. "That's the real lock. That's a lawsuit waiting to happen. That's a lien on my business. That's a letter from my insurance company telling me my policy has been canceled. I touch that door, and she'll have me tied up in court until the next ice age." He looked from the lock to me, his eyes softening. "I'm sorry, kid. I've seen this before. She's got this situation locked down tighter with that piece of paper than she does with that hunk of steel. There's nothing a contractor can do for you here. This ain't a job for a crane. It's a job for a lawyer, and a damned expensive one at that." He gave my shoulder a sympathetic squeeze, climbed back into his monster truck, and rumbled away. And that was it. The last door had closed. I was out of options. I was out of time. I was out of hope. I slumped down onto the manicured grass, put my head in my hands, and listened to the wind, which was beginning to carry the first hint of Tropical Storm Brenda's angry howl. I was well and truly screwed. The world had shrunk to the space between my hands. All I could hear was the rising wind and Dave in the background, on the phone with our boss, trying to explain how a $500,000 operation was being derailed by a $50 padlock and a woman in tennis shorts. No, Mr. Henderson, I don't think threatening to sue the entire state of Florida is going to help right now. Yes, I understand the boat is worth more than her entire bloodline. No, we can't just nudge the gate with it. Defeated, I looked up. My eyes traced the scene of my failure. The placid, trapped water of the canal. The magnificent, helpless bulk of the Dauntless. The small beige gear room, a concrete tombstone for my career. And the floodgate itself, a massive steel barrier, impassive and absolute. Carol had blocked the gear room. She had padlocked the controls for the gate. She had, in essence, locked the door. She had put all her focus on that one single point of failure. My eyes followed the concrete edge of the canal as it snaked through the neighborhood. It was a self-contained system. Water came in, water went out. The gate was for boats. Just for boats. It was the front door. But it wasn't the only way to get the water out. My brain, which had felt like a sputtering, useless engine for the past 3 hours, suddenly kicked into overdrive. An image flared in my memory. A page from the mountain of documents I'd had to study for this job. It wasn't in my main binder, it was in the deep dive supplemental package. The Serenity Springs waterway schematics. The blueprints. I scrambled to my feet, startling Dave. The schematics? Where's the planning tube? In the truck. Leo, what's going on? I didn't answer. I sprinted to our work truck, yanked a long cardboard tube from the back, and pulled out a massive, rolled-up blueprint, spreading it across the hood. My fingers traced the lines, the symbols, the technical jargon that was a second language to me. There it was. The floodgate was labeled Vessel Traffic Control. But on the far side of the community, nearly a mile away, was another facility, connected by a series of massive underground pipes. It was labeled Stormwater Drainage Pump House. Its purpose wasn't traffic control. Its purpose was to prevent the very disaster I was facing. It was designed to rapidly drain the entire 3-mile canal system, pumping the water directly into the intracoastal waterway to prevent flooding during a hurricane or a major storm surge. And then I saw the magic words in the notes section. Activation Authority. County Emergency Management. My permit. My glorious, beautiful 12-inch binder of a permit. I ripped it open, frantically flipping past the insurance bonds and the environmental reports to the section on emergency protocols. And there it was, Clause 113.8. In the event of a declared tropical storm watch or greater, the operator of any vessel over 100 tons has the authority to coordinate directly with county emergency management to ensure the safe passage or securing of the vessel. She had blocked the door. She had padlocked the light switch. She forgot I had the authority to call the power station and shut down the whole grid. A wild, giddy laugh escaped my lips. Dave looked at me like I'd finally snapped. Leo? It's a 4-minute countdown, Dave, I said, a grin spreading across my face. Get the crew ready. We're moving this boat. This was the 4 minutes later part of the story. It wasn't about a physical deployment. It was about a sudden, beautiful, bureaucratic blitzkrieg. Minute 1. I had the clause. I had the ordinance number. I had the name of the county division. I stabbed the number into my phone's keypad. Minute 2. The phone was answered by a skeptical-sounding official. County Emergency Water Management. This is Bill. I could hear the weariness in his voice. He was probably getting panicked calls about palm trees and patio furniture. Minute 3. I didn't give him a chance to be dismissive. I went into full professional mode. My voice calm, clear, and authoritative. Bill, my name is Leo Marks, permit number 77A4B9. I am the lead logistics operator for the USCGC Dauntless, a 180-ton vessel currently located in the Serenity Springs Canal system. Due to an immovable access obstruction at the primary floodgate, the vessel is unsecurable for the impending storm conditions. Per County Ordinance 113.8, I am formally requesting an immediate, emergency drainage of the Serenity Springs Canal to mitigate the risk of catastrophic failure and widespread property damage. There was a pause. I could hear him typing furiously. A 180-ton vessel? You're that transport operation? The very same, Bill, I said smoothly. And my multi-million-dollar insurance policy would hold the county liable for any damages incurred after I formally requested a preventative measure that was denied. I didn't know if that was true, but it sounded true. Minute 4. More typing. A heavy sigh. Bill knew when he was beat. The liability was too great. The logic was sound. Understood, Mr. Marks. I'm activating the pumps now. You have 15 minutes until drainage commences. Advise you get your vessel ready for settling. Good luck. He hung up. I turned to Dave, my grin so wide it hurt my face. He said yes. Dave stared at me, then at the boat, then back at me. A slow smile spread across his own face as understanding dawned. The SPMTs. The SPMTs, I confirmed. This was the ace up my sleeve. The real genius of the plan, my just-in-case contingency. Weeks ago, under the cover of night, we had sunk 2 massive, submersible, self-propelled modular transporters to the bottom of the canal directly beneath the Dauntless's keel. They were essentially giant, remote-controlled, waterproof flatbeds on dozens of wheels. The client had paid a fortune for them, and for the foresight to have them there at all. We were about to prove they were worth every penny. Suddenly, a new sound cut through the wind. A loud, piercing siren began to wail across the entire community. It was followed by a calm, robotic female voice, broadcast from speakers on lampposts. Attention, Serenity Springs residents. The emergency water management protocol has been activated. Canal drainage is commencing. Please stand clear of the waterway. Doors began to open. Residents in pastel shorts and golf shirts stumbled out of their McMansions, looking confused. And then, I saw it. The golf cart, moving at top speed, fishtailing on the pristine grass. Carol was coming, and she looked incandescent with rage. She slammed the cart to a halt a few feet away, her face a terrifying mask of fury. "What have you done?" she shrieked over the siren. "You can't do this! I forbid it!" I stood there, feeling a sense of zen-like calm I hadn't felt all day. I gave her my most beatific smile. "I'm not touching your gear room, Carol," I shouted back cheerfully. "I'm not touching your precious committee-approved floodgate. I am simply following county-mandated emergency procedures to safeguard property during an impending weather event. It's all in the bylaws." "The county bylaws? You should read them sometime. They're riveting." Her mouth opened and closed like a gasping fish. She had no response. I had not broken her rule. I had simply rendered it, and her entire pathetic power structure, completely and utterly irrelevant. And then the show began. With a deep guttural roar from a mile away, the pumps kicked in. The effect was immediate and astonishing. The water level in the canal began to drop. It wasn't a gentle draining. It was like someone had pulled the plug on a giant 3-mile-long bathtub. First a foot, then 5 feet, then 10. All around the canal, the residents' multi-million-dollar yachts and ski boats began to list, groaning as their hulls scraped against the bottom or tilted awkwardly against their docks. A chorus of horrified gasps rose from the homeowners. The Dauntless, however, descended with the grace of an elevator. With a soft, metallic groan, her massive weight settled perfectly onto the submerged SPMT platform. The water continued to recede, cascading down the concrete slopes of the canal until there was nothing left but a few inches of muddy, brackish water. There, in the middle of a giant concrete ditch, sat a 110-foot Coast Guard cutter, perched regally on a massive, wheeled transport platform. I picked up the heavy-duty remote control that was tethered to my belt. I pressed a button. The SPMT's twin diesel engines roared to life, the sound echoing off the concrete walls of the now empty canal. I pushed the joystick forward. Slowly, majestically, with the unstoppable momentum of righteous victory, the Dauntless began to move. We were driving a warship down a suburban ditch. It was the most absurd, most beautiful, most glorious parade I had ever witnessed. We rolled past stunned residents filming on their phones. We rolled past the sad listing yachts of the rich and powerful. And best of all, we rolled right past the small, beige gear room with its stupid little lock and its useless laminated sign. We rolled past the closed, impotent floodgate. And we rolled past Carol, who stood frozen on the bank, her face a perfect portrait of apoplectic rage and shattered authority. I gave her a jaunty little 2-finger salute. I don't think she appreciated it. We drove the Dauntless up the gentle slope of the boat ramp on the other side of the gate, and with a final, triumphant splash, the cutter slid off its transport cradle and into the wide, gray, beautifully open waters of the intracoastal waterway. Just as the first fat drops of rain from Tropical Storm Brenda began to fall, I gunned the engines and pointed our bow towards the sea. We were free. The bridge of the Dauntless was an oasis of calm. The storm was still on its way, but out here, on the open water, it was just weather. It was a problem to be managed, not a war to be fought against a petty tyrant. My phone, which had been silent during my moment of despair, was now having a complete meltdown. "You are not going to believe this," Dave said, holding his own phone out to me. He was scrolling through a social media site, a huge grin on his face. "We're going viral." He showed me the video. Someone, probably a kid from one of the house, had gotten a perfect shot of the whole thing. The water draining, the cutter rising on its platform, and the slow, surreal procession down the empty canal. The title was already trending: "Florida Man Escapes HOA by Driving a Warship Down a Ditch." Dave started reading the comments aloud. "That's not malicious compliance, that's malicious brilliance." The HOA president's face at the end. Chef's kiss. "My man literally drained their swamp. A true American hero. Give this guy the key to the city and the remote control to everything." My phone buzzed. It was a number I didn't recognize. I answered it warily. "Marks," I said. "Leo, it's Officer Miller." The voice was unmistakable, but the weary resignation was gone. It had been replaced by something that sounded suspiciously like amusement. "Just thought you'd like an update on the situation back at Serenity Springs." "I'm all ears, officer," I said, leaning back in the captain's chair. "Well," he began, and I could hear him trying to suppress a chuckle. "It seems that when you drain a 3-mile canal, a lot of very expensive boats end up sitting in the mud. Very, very expensive boats. I've got about 30 yacht owners down here screaming for somebody's head." "And whose head would that be?" I asked innocently. "Well, that's the funny part. They all saw Ms. Carroll screaming at you not to drain the canal, but they also know she's the one who locked the gate in the first place. The HOA's insurance adjuster just showed up, and he looks like he's about to have an aneurysm. They're talking about millions in salvage and repair costs." He paused, and I heard him talking to someone in the background. "No, sir, I can't arrest the water. Please step back." He came back on the line. "Anyway, the county just slapped the HOA with a massive bill for the emergency pump activation, plus a formal citation against Carroll, personally, for reckless obstruction of a permitted emergency operation. The HOA held an emergency meeting about 10 minutes ago. She's not the president anymore. I think they're planning on suing her into the Stone Age." "Huh," I said, taking a sip of the celebratory and still lukewarm coffee Dave had handed me. "Shame." "Yeah, a real shame," Miller said, and I could hear the grin in his voice. "Just wanted to say, nice work, and thanks. This is the most interesting thing that's happened here all year." He hung up. I was still smiling when my phone rang again. This time it was the client, Chadwick Thorne. I braced myself. "Leo, my man," he shouted, his voice booming over the phone. "My dude, I saw the video. That was the most rock and roll thing I have ever seen. Driving my boat down a ditch to own the Libs, or the Karens, or whatever? Epic. Absolutely epic." "Just doing my job, Mr. Thorne," I said. "Job, schmob. That was art. I'm texting you a bonus right now. Go buy yourself a steak. Or a car. Whatever. You're a legend, Leo." The call ended, and a second later, a notification from my bank popped up with a number that made my eyes water. The rain was coming down harder now, the sky a uniform slate gray. The sea was choppy, but the Dauntless cut through the waves with a steady, reassuring rhythm. We were safe. The mission was a success. And the victory was sweeter than any I'd ever tasted. I stood there on the bridge, the lights of the coast receding behind us, and thought about the whole ridiculous day. It wasn't about the boat, not really. It was about rules. Carol had weaponized her little rulebook, using it as a shield for her petty cruelty. She thought her binder was the ultimate authority. But she made a rookie mistake. She never bothered to read mine. She was so focused on her power over the front door that she never considered I had the keys to the whole foundation. She drew a line in the sand, so I moved the ocean. I raised my coffee thermos in a silent toast towards the distant, storm-lashed shore. "Here's to you, Carol," I said to the empty bridge, the hum of the engines my only company. "You were so proud of your little lock on your little door. You forgot to look at the big picture." I took a long sip of the cold coffee. It had never tasted better. "You blocked the gate," I said with a final, satisfied grin. "So I pulled the plug on your whole damn bathtub. Cheers."